I never thought appendicitis would change my life, but here we are. 3 weeks ago, I was being wheeled into emergency surgery at 2 a.m, clutching my side and trying not to vomit in the ambulance. Today there's a man sleeping in my bed who wasn't even in my life a month ago. His name is Marcus. He lives 3 doors down, and somehow between the surgical staples and the pain medication haze, he became the most important person in my world. Let me back up. I'm Owen, I'm 28, and I've lived in this apartment building for about a year and a half. It's one of those converted warehouse buildings downtown, all exposed brick and industrial windows, the kind of place where everyone nods politely in the elevator but nobody really knows each other. I'd seen Marcus around maybe a dozen times, always thought he was attractive in that effortless way some guys have. Dark hair that falls just right, warm brown eyes, the kind of smile that makes you look twice. But we'd never had a real conversation, just the occasional hey when we passed in the hallway. The night of the surgery, I was alone. Completely alone. My family lives 800 miles away, my closest friends were scattered across the city with their own lives, and I'd been single for almost 2 years after a relationship that ended badly enough that I'd basically retreated into myself. The hospital staff kept asking who they could call, who would pick me up, who would stay with me for the first 24 hours, and I kept mumbling that I'd figure it out, even though I had no idea what I was going to do. They released me the next afternoon with a list of restrictions longer than my arm. No lifting anything over 10 pounds, no driving for at least a week, no cooking, no bending, no stretching, basically no being a functional human being. Someone handed me prescriptions I couldn't fill myself and discharge papers I could barely read through the pain medication fog, and I somehow made it into an Uber that drove me home. Getting from the car to my 3rd-floor apartment was its own special kind of hell. The elevator was broken, naturally, because the universe has a sense of humour. I made it up 1 flight of stairs before I had to stop, sweating and nauseous, wondering if this was how I was going to die, not from the appendicitis, but from sheer stubborn stupidity on a stairwell. That's when Marcus appeared. I heard footsteps below me, quick and light, and then his voice, concerned and a little alarmed. "Hey, are you okay? You're the guy from 312, right?" I must have looked absolutely pathetic, hunched over the railing in yesterday's clothes, still wearing my hospital bracelet. I tried to say I was fine, because that's what I always say, but what came out was more like a wheeze. He didn't ask permission. He just moved in next to me, got his shoulder under my arm, and basically carried me up the remaining 2 flights. His apartment was 314, just down the hall from mine, and when we got to my door I fumbled with my keys like a drunk person, until he gently took them from me and unlocked it himself. My apartment was a disaster. I'd left in an ambulance at 2 a.m, so there were dishes in the sink, laundry on the couch, the general chaos of someone who'd been living their normal life before everything went sideways. Marcus didn't comment on any of it. He just helped me to my bedroom, made sure I could get situated, and asked if I needed anything. I should have said no. I should have thanked him, and let him leave. Instead, I heard myself asking if he could maybe fill my prescriptions, and I absolutely hated how small my voice sounded. But he just nodded, took the papers and my insurance card, and said he'd be back in an hour. I fell asleep almost immediately, the kind of exhausted, medicated sleep where you're not sure what's real. When I woke up it was dark outside, and there was a glass of water on my nightstand that hadn't been there before, along with my medications in a neat row and a note in handwriting I didn't recognise. Took the liberty of organising these by time of day. Also, you need to eat something before the pain meds. There's soup in your fridge. Marcus, apartment 314. The soup was homemade. Not canned, not from a restaurant, but actually homemade, with vegetables and chicken and little pasta stars floating in golden broth. I ate it sitting up in bed at 9 p.m, crying a little bit, because I couldn't remember the last time anyone had taken care of me like this, and also because the pain medication was making me emotional. I thought that would be it. A really kind gesture from a thoughtful neighbour, a story I'd tell someday about human goodness. But the next morning there was a knock on my door at 8 a.m. I shuffled over in my pyjamas, moving like an old man, and there was Marcus with another container of soup and a bag of groceries. "I figured you probably can't get out much," he said, and there was something almost shy in the way he said it, like he wasn't sure if he was overstepping. I was going to the store anyway, so I picked up some basics: bread, eggs, fruit, that kind of thing, and I made extra soup last night. I invited him in because I didn't know what else to do. He put the groceries away while I protested weakly that he didn't need to do all this, and he just smiled and said, "I know I don't need to. I want to." Then he made me scrambled eggs, soft and buttery and perfect, and we sat at my kitchen table making small talk while I tried to process what was happening. He worked from home, he told me. Software development, the kind of job where his hours were flexible. He'd moved to the building about 6 months ago, loved the neighbourhood, had been meaning to meet more people but somehow never got around to it. He was 31, originally from Seattle, had a younger sister he talked to every Sunday. Normal information, the kind of things you learn about someone over coffee, except we were having this conversation while I was wearing 3-day-old pyjamas, and he was checking to make sure I was taking my antibiotics on schedule. That became the routine. Every morning at 8, Marcus would knock on my door with soup. Sometimes it was the same chicken and stars, sometimes it was tomato bisque or butternut squash or this incredible mushroom barley that tasted like comfort in a bowl. He'd stay for breakfast, make sure I ate something, check that I was doing okay. Then he'd disappear to his own apartment to work, and I'd spend the day on my couch, reading or watching TV or mostly just sleeping. But he'd come back. Around lunch, he'd text to ask if I needed anything. In the evening, he'd show up with dinner, something easy to eat and digest, and we'd end up talking for hours about everything and nothing, our childhoods, our jobs, places we'd travelled or wanted to travel. He told me about coming out to his parents when he was 19, how his dad hadn't spoken to him for 2 years, but now they were slowly rebuilding something. I told him about my ex, about how I'd spent the last 2 years basically hiding from the possibility of getting hurt again. There was something about the vulnerability of it all that made honesty easier. I was physically helpless, unable to pretend I had everything together, and somehow that created this space where we could both just be real with each other. I learned that Marcus had anxiety, that he saw a therapist every other week, that he'd been lonely in the city but didn't know how to fix it. He learned that I was scared of depending on people, that I'd rather suffer alone than ask for help, that I was only just starting to realise how isolated I'd become. By the end of the first week, I was looking forward to his visits more than anything else in my day. The way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the careful way he'd check my incision without making it weird, the comfortable silences that would stretch between us while we ate. I started timing my showers before he arrived in the morning, putting on actual clothes instead of pyjamas, caring about what I looked like in a way I hadn't in years, and I was pretty sure, though I didn't want to assume, that he was flirting with me. Little things. The way he'd touch my shoulder when he passed behind me, how he'd lean in close when showing me something on his phone, the time he brushed hair off my forehead and let his hand linger just a second too long. But I was afraid to read into it, afraid I was just lonely and medicated and misinterpreting kindness for something more. The shift happened on day 10. I was finally starting to feel more human, able to move around without wincing, thinking about going back to work the following week. Marcus came over for dinner like usual, but this time I'd insisted on ordering pizza because I felt guilty about him cooking for me constantly. We were on my couch, paper plates balanced on our laps, arguing good-naturedly about whether pineapple belonged on pizza when he suddenly got quiet. "I need to tell you something," he said, and my heart dropped into my stomach because that phrase never precedes good news. "I've really loved getting to know you these past couple weeks. Like, really loved it. And I know the circumstances are weird, and you're recovering, and maybe this is completely inappropriate timing, but I can't keep coming over here and pretending I'm just being neighbourly." I couldn't breathe. Literally forgot how breathing worked. He continued, staring at his pizza like it held the secrets of the universe. "I think you're incredible, Owen. I've thought that since the first time I saw you in the elevator months ago, but I'm terrible at talking to people I'm attracted to, so I just never said anything. And then this happened, and suddenly I had a reason to knock on your door, and now I'm in way over my head, because I don't want to just be your neighbour who brings you soup. I want to be more than that, if you want that too, which you might not, and that's completely okay. I just needed to say it out loud before I lost my nerve." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. I was aware of every sound in the apartment, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant traffic outside, my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Marcus looked terrified, vulnerable in a way that made my chest ache, and I realized this brave, kind man had just laid himself completely bare for me. "I want that too," I said, and my voice came out rough and a little broken. "I've wanted that since day 3, maybe earlier. I just didn't think someone like you could be interested in someone like me." His head snapped up, eyes wide. "Someone like you? Owen? You're smart and funny and so strong, even when you're trying to pretend you don't need anyone. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How rare you are?" I kissed him. Or he kissed me. I'm honestly not sure who moved first, but suddenly we were kissing, careful and sweet because I was still healing, and it felt like something clicking into place, like finding something I didn't know I'd been missing. When we pulled apart, we were both smiling like idiots, and he rested his forehead against mine. "So what now?" I whispered. "Now I keep bringing you soup," he said. "But maybe we call them dates instead of welfare checks." We laughed, and it felt easy, natural, like we'd been doing this for years instead of minutes. We spent the rest of the evening curled up together on the couch, his arm around my shoulders, watching a movie neither of us paid attention to because we were too busy stealing glances at each other and grinning. That was 4 days ago. Since then, Marcus has basically moved in, though we're both pretending it's still temporary. His toothbrush appeared in my bathroom. His laptop lives on my kitchen table. He sleeps in my bed every night, and I wake up to him making coffee every morning, and it should feel too fast, too soon, too intense, but it doesn't. It feels right. Yesterday, my best friend called to check on me, and when I told her about Marcus, she was silent for a long moment before saying, "Owen, I've known you for 6 years, and I've never heard you sound this happy. Don't overthink this. Just let yourself have it." So that's what I'm doing, letting myself have this unexpected, beautiful thing that started with emergency surgery and homemade soup, and a neighbour brave enough to knock on my door. We haven't labelled what this is yet, haven't had the "what are we" conversation, but we don't really need to. I know what he is to me. He's the person who showed up when I needed someone most, who saw me at my most vulnerable and didn't run away, who makes me want to be brave enough to let someone in again. Tonight, we're supposed to have dinner with his sister over video chat. Tomorrow I'm finally going back to work and Marcus is insisting on driving me, even though I told him I'm perfectly capable of taking the subway. Next week, we're going to talk about whether he should officially move in or if we should slow down and do this properly. But honestly, I think we both already know the answer. Sometimes I think about that night on the stairwell, how I almost didn't ask for help, almost waved him off and tried to make it on my own. How different everything would be if I had. And I'm so grateful I didn't. Grateful for appendicitis, for broken elevators, for the chance encounter that changed everything. Marcus is calling from the kitchen now, asking if I want tea. I call back yes, and I hear him humming while he fills the kettle, and I think this is what happiness feels like. Not the dramatic, sweep you off your feet kind, but the quiet, everyday kind. The kind that tastes like homemade soup and looks like someone caring enough to show up every single day until showing up becomes coming home. I never thought I'd be grateful for emergency surgery, but here we are. 3 weeks, countless containers of soup, and one very persistent neighbour later. I'm not alone anymore, and that makes all the difference.